I made an AI audiobook maker / narrator for these AI voice tools that I've been going over on my channel, and I'm going to give you a quick demo and then talk a little bit about it so that you guys can also get this installed on your system. So here I have it opened and an audiobook processed. I'm going to go ahead and change the font size a little bit smaller, and we're going to play from all selected.
This is really bad. Lost and penniless. Those few words were all he could think of. Well, penniless wasn't quite right. He did have his wallet in his pocket, and setting aside the fact that he had an abundance of small change and very few notes, it couldn't be denied that he had his assets on him. More than enough to go to the nearest mall to do some shopping and eat some lunch. Even so, he could only be called penniless. Looks like the currency around here is completely different after all.
So what did you think about that? There are some other cool features in here. So penniless was not said correctly, so I can always regenerate the audio. It's going to regenerate the audio for that sentence, and then we can go ahead and see if it said penniless correctly.
Well, penniless wasn't quite right.
And there we go. So it can generate an audiobook from a text file that you feed it. It can load an existing audiobook. It can now export this to a single audio file, and there's just a lot of things that I'll go over in the video, but let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some prerequisites and how this might be able to get installed on your system. First, as of right now for the initial release, you do need an NVIDIA graphics card. I do plan on adding AMD and Mac in the future, but unfortunately I don't have that hardware, so I can't really test it. I believe anything from the 10 series upwards should be decent enough for this to get audio running, because we will need to install some programs that are decently GPU heavy and require quite a bit of compute. My recommendation would be at least 6 GB of VRAM, though I do believe you can run Tortoise, which is the TTS system that I'm going to be using, on a little bit less if you choose low VRAM. Alright, and so hopping on over into my GitHub repository here, I have my audiobook maker. If you scroll down, I do have a README, so you could follow the instructions here, but I do want to talk about some other prerequisites. You will need CUDA installed on your system, so you need to make sure that you have the latest version of CUDA for your NVIDIA graphics card, and we'll need Python, Git, and then we'll need Tortoise. So if you don't have Tortoise installed on your system, please go ahead and follow this YouTube tutorial right here, where I go over in depth on how you can get that installed. So first things first, let's go ahead and open these links in new tabs. And here is Python 3.10. I recommend you get Python 3.10, so all you have to do is scroll down to the bottom of the page, go ahead and install Windows Installer 64-bit, and get that installed. When you start installing it, make sure you do the checkmark that says Add to Path and get that up and going. And then you need to download Git. And then I do recommend you get VS Code as well. If you need additional help on the installation, I will link a tutorial where I go over the installation on a fresh system, so that'll be that. And then for Tortoise, if you did not want to follow the YouTube video, there is the installation wiki on the Git Ecker page here that you could follow if you so chose. So with those prerequisites out of the way, I did say you do need an NVIDIA GPU, but hopefully I can get this working on Mac and AMD in the future. We will now go ahead and start with installation of the audiobook maker. So navigate on over into any empty directory. For Windows 11, you can right click and do open in terminal. I believe if you're on Windows 10, you have to do shift and then open in CMD, but you should be able to open up a terminal in whatever window you are in. If not, just go up to the window and type in CMD and it'll open up a window. Inside of here, we're going to do git clone, and we're going to install this directory. So we'll go ahead and git clone my audiobook maker, and then we'll go ahead and change directory into it. So go ahead, copy paste that, and then we'll cd into it. So if you type in dir, you should see all of these different files that I have installed. And then so the next thing that we're going to do is set up a virtual environment so that we don't have any clashing packages from Python. And to do that, we just go ahead, paste that. It's going to set up our environment, and then we'll copy and paste this line right here as well to now activate the virtual environment. If you're getting an issue where it's saying you don't have permissions or something along the lines of that, you have to change your execution policy. So to do that, we open up PowerShell, run as administrator, go ahead and click yes. Inside of here, you would do set execution policy remote signed. And then once you have that, you would do A and then enter select all. I'm not going to do that because I already have mine done. So once you have that, you should be able to do the VENV scripts activate. Okay, cool. So once you have the script activated, we're going to go ahead and do a bunch of installations. So we do need to install PyTorch. So go ahead and right click this and open up PyTorch. We're going to scroll down, make sure it's stable 2.10, Windows, and then 11.7 as that's the one that I installed. We're going to go ahead, copy that, go on over back into that window, and then we'll go ahead, right click, pip install that. And then this one will take quite a bit of time because it's about 3 gigabytes. So just wait for that to finish installing. Once that is done installing, we need to install the pip requirements. So just copy that line and go ahead and copy paste. Sorry, there's a quick typo. I'll fix that later, but go ahead, copy and paste that line and then click enter. Next one we need to install is my RVC package. So go ahead, pip install that one as well. This one will run into issues if you did not install PyTorch correctly. So make sure that is installed correctly first. And then lastly, let's go ahead and copy paste this one into the PowerShell window as well. Okay, cool. So we've got most of the installation done. We do need to now get some PyTorch files and some pickle tensors. So there are 2 files that you need from RVC, which are RMVPE and then Hubert base. You can either go to the RVC Hugging Face to get them in their Hugging Face here, or I went ahead and just uploaded them to mine so that everything's in one location, because I have an additional file in there that you guys can use, which is going to be the Azaz PTH for voice. So I'm providing a voice for this application that you guys can use and test out. So we're going to need to install and download each one of these. So starting with rmvpe.pt, go into that audiobook maker folder. We're just going to install this into the parent directory. And then for Hubert base, we're going to do the same thing. Make sure you're an audiobook maker. Install this into the parent directory. And then for the PTH file, if you have a voice from AI Hub or from RVC training, this is where your voice would come in handy. I'm providing one today. So the location that these voices are going to be inside of this voice models folder. So double click into that, and inside of voice models, you're going to place your voice models here. So we'll go ahead and save that. And while those ones are downloading, we do need to now do FFmpeg. So go ahead and click on Windows, and then we'll go to gyan.dev. FFmpeg, the link is inside of the GitHub repository. Once you're on here, you just need to click on ffmpeg get full.7z, and then go ahead and place this anywhere because we're just gonna have to extract it. Alrighty, so 9-zip, 7-zip, whatever you want to use for this extraction, you need a .7z extractor. In my case, I'm using brezip, so I'm gonna go ahead and extract files here. And once it's done, we can go ahead and close out of all of that. And once it's extracted, you should have an ffmpeg full build finished. So let's double click into that, double click into here, and then we'll double click into our bin, and we need to copy ffmpeg and ffprobe. So go ahead, right click and copy those, then head back on over to where your audiobook maker is, and we'll go ahead and paste those into here. So now those are also in the parent directory. And then lastly, this one's just talking about the RVC AI voices. You just want to place them inside of voice model directory. Currently, index files are not supported. However, I will open up a more advanced tab to where you can actually access the index files. So I know that was a lot of installations, so sorry if you guys got lost in that, but that is what you do need to get this up and running right now. I do need to work on it to make it a little bit easier for you guys to install, so that is in the pipeline, but I didn't have enough time this week to actually finish that, and I'll be gone for a little bit of time. So now we're gonna go ahead and move on to how you actually get it working and how it runs. But before that, I wanted to announce that I am opening up YouTube memberships. So if you like my content and if you want to support the channel, consider becoming a member of the channel. It really helps me out, and I may be offering a little bit of tips and tricks with some videos for YouTube members. It's still currently growing, and I do want to make it a rewarding experience if you guys do become a YouTube member. So just a little quick self plug, we're gonna go ahead and jump into the usage of the tool and how you can get it up and running. So let's head back on over into the environment, and if you have VS Code, I really recommend you do this in VS Code. That is what I've done everything in, so I'm going to be opening it up in VS Code. So double click into Audiobook Maker, and then I'm going to right click and open with code. If you don't have that option to right click and open in code, all you have to do is open up VS Code and then just drag and drop the folder into VS Code, and when you do that, it should open up the folder in VS Code. Okay, cool. So once we have this, there are a few things that we need to do. So in the bottom right corner, you want to change your interpreter to VENV. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll do Control Shift P, and then Python restart language server, so that these things get highlighted correctly. All right, cool. So if you did everything correctly, it should be all green for the most part on this top area right here. And we should be all good to go. So like I said a little bit earlier, you do need Tortoise TTS installed for this, and you do need MRQ's version of Tortoise TTS installed. So we're gonna go ahead and launch that. So wherever you have it located, I'm gonna go and open it, and you just need to run the start.bat. So this is how you normally get Tortoise TTS up and running. And then we need to configure a few things inside of Tortoise in order for this to get working. So once it says local URL, you can control click it and it'll open up a new tab. And inside of here, you don't need to adjust anything, but what you do need on the settings tab is you need to change the results folder to some absolute path. So for example, it doesn't really matter exactly where. So inside of the AI voice cloning, the Tortoise repository, you have a folder called results. You could just double click into it, go up to the tab here, copy address as text, and then paste that into here. And then you would be fine or good to go. I have mine in a different folder where I store my Tortoise TTS voice files. And lastly, for your autoregressive model, you probably, if you didn't train anything, you will only have autoregressive.pth, which will be this one right here, which is absolutely fine. But I do recommend you check out my tutorial for how to train a model to get it sounding more like a character that you want it to. And this is one last thing that is a carryover from that Tortoise tutorial, but you should have a folder inside of voices, and this is the one that we're going to need to set up a little bit later. But for this example, I'm going to be using Mel, and like I said in that Tortoise tutorial video, you only want about 2 to 3 files. I have 5 10-second audio files in here for conditioning the text-to-speech to kind of sound like that character. So you do need that inside of voices, and that should be everything you need for Tortoise TTS. So let's go back into VS Code, and then what we'll need to set up is this tort.yaml file. So let's rename it to tort.yaml. Go ahead, enter, and this is where we need to enter in that voice name. In my case, I'm using Mel, and then I'm using 4 for my samples and iterations for 32. These affect the speed, so if yours is running a little bit slower, you can put samples down to 2. And then I would recommend iterations you can play around with, as I talked about in the Tortoise videos. And then for temperature, I'm going to do 8. And then these other things I am going to leave the same. For temperature, I'm going to do 0.8. So that is all we need to get going for the Tortoise YAML. So we should be able to now go into audiobook_app 2.0 and run it. So to run it, we can either do F5 or we can go to run and click start debugging. And then once this pops up, just click on Python file and it's going to do its magic. So it's going to launch and we'll see a graphical user interface pop up soon. Alrighty, so this is how it's going to be. You can change the font size with a little menu bar up here. I'm going to go ahead and leave it about here, and you can expand the window to see a little bit more. And if we take a look at voice models, we've got one voice model in here. If you've got more voice models inside of the voice models folder, you'll see those as well. Here we have azas.pth. To get the audiobook going, we need to have a text file with some text in it. So this can literally be anything. For this example, I'm going to use the ReZero web novel. So let's just go ahead and copy and paste that. Currently, it does only work with text files. PDFs are a little bit wonky, so you do need to be able to just copy and paste it into a text file. And so once you copy and paste it into that, you could save it. And once you have it saved, all you need to do is just go into here. When you click select text file, it's going to pop up this window where you can select what text file you want to use. In this case, I did text_small.txt. And then if we try to do audiobook generation, we need to enter in a book name before proceeding. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and just call it V0. And we'll go ahead and now do start audiobook generation. So you'll see in the bottom here, it's going to start calling the API. And then you'll also see in the folder, so inside of audiobooks, you will have the name of the book. And then inside of here, you'll have all of the different audio files that are in here. So when it's generating, the only thing you can do is play from audio. But let's just go ahead and run through the audio play first, and then I'll go over some little quirks that are in the GUI application. So here we have some sentences. You can click on them and play them. So let's play this first sentence.
This is really bad.
There you go. You can play a sentence there. You can play another one.
Well, penniless wasn't quite right.
Or you could click on anywhere and then start play all from selected. So it'll start playing them in sequence.
Lost and penniless. Those few words were all he could think of. Well, penniless wasn't quite right. He did have his...
And then if you want to pause it, you can click on pause and it'll stop the voice playing. So if I go ahead and unpause it,
wallet in his pocket and setting his...
it'll continue playing. So you have the pause button for that. I don't have a stop button. I probably should make one, but pause does that just fine. And then you've got these last two buttons, which are load existing audiobook and export audiobook. So in this case, the audiobook has finished, so we can load it and play it just as we would normally in the future. So if you close out of the application and then relaunch it, if you do load existing audiobook, you just go into your audiobooks folder, you go into the audiobook name, and then you'll see no items match your search. You can go ahead and click select folder. And then this will load it to where you can do all of the same audio playback as before. And if you like it, now you can export the audiobook. So if you click export audiobook, you want to select that same folder where the audiobook is in, and then you'll click select folder, because all it's doing is combining those audio files. So once you do that, inside of the command line, you'll probably see something that says export audiobooks. Now inside of the audiobook, you'll have a new folder called exported_audiobooks. And so here we have it. This is the audiobook with all of them combined. As you can see, it is 34 seconds. So we can go ahead, close out of that. If you do choose to export another audiobook, you would just click that same folder and then you would just do select folder, and then it would export another one. So I have it to where it'll just resuffix it so that you don't overwrite your previous audiobook exports. So that is pretty cool in my opinion. And there is one more functionality that I've coded into it to start the process again, or to continue an audiobook. Say if you end up stopping it in the middle of a generation, or you need to come back to it later. So if we go into text.txt, we've got hundreds of lines here. And so let's just say that we want to create an audiobook with that instead. So we'll go back on out to Audiobook Maker, open up text. We'll call this one Gatsby because it's Gatsby. And then we'll start audiobook generation. So it's going to start generating and producing sentences for it. And we're going to go ahead and stop it after the second sentence. So to stop it, all I have to do is just click on this X right here after third, and it's going to close out of the process and stop it. And all we have to do is relaunch the application. So F5, or you can just go to run up here. And when we go to load existing audiobook, you see now there's a Gatsby folder. We can go ahead and select it. It says audio files missing for some sentences. So we can click OK. And it says audio generation seems to have stopped at sentence 3. Would you like to continue from this point? And we can now continue with generation. So yes, and it's going to continue from that fourth sentence. So as you can see, it's continuing down here in the window. And one thing you may notice is that these buttons on the left hand side are no longer clickable. So this is to prevent any mishaps from occurring or any issues with conflicting processes, because if you run any of these, it could cause it to glitch and break some things. So I just went ahead and disabled these buttons while it's generating. However, while it is generating, you can play the audio so you can listen back to it as it's going. So if your graphics card is fast enough, it'll actually generate audio faster than it can play. So if you just click on the first start, you can now just listen back to the audiobook. So play all from selected.
And more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since.
And there is one more functionality I forgot to go over, and that is regenerate audio. So like I said in the beginning of the video, you can click on a sentence, and if you take a listen to it,
well, penniless wasn't quite right.
if we don't like how that sentence sounds, we can click on regenerate audio. The window application is actually going to freeze, so you're not going to be able to move it. But once you're able to move the application again, once you're able to select buttons, it is good to go now. So if we take a listen to it again,
well, penniless wasn't quite right.
It now sounds different. So you can regenerate any sentence you choose. So click any of these, you can regenerate audio, it's going to freeze. And unfortunately, I got home and decided to add more functionality. So here are a couple of more things. You can now add an index. So if you just want to specify an index from the RVC AI voices, you can move them into the folder called voices index. So just go ahead and drag those voices index into that folder, and then you'll be able to see them in here. You can change the index effect like you can in RVC. So this is going to be the same effect. The higher the index, the more accent the voice has, or the more the effect that the index file has on it. And then now you can change the voice pitch. So let's go ahead and do a quick example. So I'm going to put index at 0 to have no index, and we're going to regenerate this sentence. Here's how it sounds.
This is really bad.
Now I'm going to increase the index to 1, and here's how the index affected it.
This is really bad.
And that's because it has a Japanese accent from this index file. So if you have an index file and you don't want it to affect anything, put it down to 0. And then for voice pitch, we're going to change the voice pitch to a little bit higher now. Let's do 12. And here is that.
This is really bad.
And there you have it. That's all the functionality of this simple audiobook maker. Like I said, I do need to simplify a couple of things, like the installation I wish was a little bit quicker. I want to get this working on AMD and Mac eventually, but I might need the hardware to test that out. And then the other big thing that I need to do is get this working with other languages. And I think that's going to be a task in and of itself, because there's an inherent difficulty with getting text-to-speech working with other languages. It is very possible, and that is one thing that I've got to dive into a little bit more. So look out for that as well. But that would be one great enhancement for this audiobook maker. All right, and I think that's going to be it for today's video. If you guys do run into any issues, please let me know. It is very much a work in progress, and it's not perfect. However, I wanted to get it out to you guys as quick as possible without, waiting for a long time. But that's going to be it for today's YouTube video. Like I said, I will be opening up memberships. So if you want to support the channel, please consider becoming a member of the channel. And with that, yeah, I'll see you guys later.